Welcome to Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Jesse Ott, the host of this podcast, which is all about beverage innovation. I talk with innovation pioneers from agriculture to glass. Thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe to be notified of all new episodes. Hello, everybody. This is Jesse Ott, and I have Eric Martindale here today. I'm super stoked. He's founder of Elite Commerce Group and former Marine. And he is the first guest that I have that is in this new series that I'm going to be recording and sharing with you. Stories of people who have been in service and then have gone back to civilian life and actually has had their own success. And so I'm super pumped that Eric was able to make it today, and he is launching this new segment. So hello, Eric.
Hey, thank you for having me. Excited.
Yeah, no, this came together really quickly, and so I know you're on the road a lot, so I appreciate you being able to kind of give an hour or so to kind of come in and talk with me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So where are you calling from?
Eastern Pennsylvania, a little bit north of Philadelphia, about an hour north, just outside of a small city called Bethlehem.
Okay, interesting. Well, we just had a big election, right? And so I know Pennsylvania is a really major state, one way or the other. So did you have a lot of people coming to your house and telling you how to vote?
Yes. It is. Pennsylvania is a war zone in that regard, and absolutely people knocking on the door and signs, and it's crazy. So I am definitely glad that's behind us.
Do you feel that helps?
The people banging on the door? No, I do not. I think people generally know what they're going to do, 6 months, a year out from an election, and that stuff is just noise. I don't understand why people do it, to be honest with you.
Well, they say it helps. I mean, I know that Kamala, that side is really excited because they had a lot of people in the streets, and I'm just like wondering if that's going to matter, because I think to your point, they already had made their decision.
Yeah.
But one way or the other, we'll whatever side you're on, we'll get through it.
Yeah, it's always that way. You approach an election and you really want your side to win, or you're terrified of the other person, and then you get up the next day and you feel really great or really horrible, and then an hour later you realize it's exactly like it was the day before. So
yeah, that's true. I do say that one thing that relates back to the beverage business is the tariffs that Trump put on previously. Yeah. It killed a lot of businesses. It hurt us badly.
Tariffs are tough.
So hopefully, that doesn't happen again. But what are you going to do about it? I can't do anything about it.
Just adjust, yeah. No matter who gets in, and that the one thing I like to think of is everybody's in the same boat, for the most part. So whatever gets implemented, we kind of all have to deal with it across the board. So it hurts, but I think as long as it hurts everybody equally, you all adjust and business goes on. But
so speaking from the Marine experience that you have, what does elections, how do they affect you? Does it affect you guys maybe a little bit more on the military side than the civilian side?
Yeah, when you're in, so when you're on active duty, there are, every president will come in and they'll implement policies, and they do change. They change the way you operate. They change, it's a little bit different than having a job where you go home at the end of the night and maybe vent a little bit and you have your own space. When you're on active duty, the government kind of owns you in a sense. Yeah. Like it matters what you do on your own time, and you really don't own your evenings or your weekends, and you see those policies pushed down very directly. So it almost doesn't even matter, who you wanted to win, whether it was your side or the other side. There's going to be things that are pushed down, and change is always painful. So whether it's change you want or not. We're creatures of habit, and yeah, it definitely makes a big difference.
Um, I was thinking about so my only I didn't serve. My dad did. He was in Vietnam. He was in the Ninth
Oh wow,
Infantry, right in the middle of the jungle. Got Agent Orange, all the things.
wow.
um, but I was thinking about like in in the CIA, and I don't know if this is what I've read, or what. Anyway, they push down like, hey, whatever you write, we could. You never know. The president could read it, and I'm just
Really,
and it was like one of these pressured down things of like you might be able to have your dossier read in front of the president or whatever. Is there anything similar to that in the military?
Jesse, where did you said that you referenced the CIA?
Yeah, like in the CIA, they have um I don't know where, I guess I read it somewhere where it's like,
Oh,
hey, if you're in, whatever country and you're reporting on XYZ, you never know, write it like it's like the president might read it on his desk or her desk.
yeah. Well,
Is
that
that
that was
thing?
yeah. Oh, yeah. That's why I asked. That I was really curious that that is very very accurate. So I didn't know if you had some kind of personal experience there, but there have been Marines court-martialed for what they put on Facebook.
My
It's not the same as a dossier, but
God.
absolutely you're responsible for everything we would say everything you do or fail to do. So it doesn't matter if you're on your personal time. You are beholden to the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and it's almost like when you join the military, you give up your rights as a citizen in a sense, and you agree to be placed under the UCMJ. It's a different set of laws, and
Wow.
you can be adjudicated for almost anything. There's really no. You might have personal time, but you're still you're still under the authority of the military at any
Now,
given
is
time.
that said in fear to install in like as a fear tactic,
I think
or is it really just they want you to behave?
it's order. It's order. If you look at the UCMJ, it says right in the beginning to promote good order and discipline. And if Vietnam, I mean, what a great example. What a conflict. Those guys, your dad and those people went through something that that is just uh, I think unimaginable. Just reading about it and then having some experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then reading and studying and training, in regard to what happened in Vietnam. You especially after going through modern combat, you look back and have this moment of, oh wow, they really went through some things. And you can imagine taking a force in a country like ours, and then putting them in a conflict like that, and saying, well, you can kind of do what you want to do. People, people would just run. So
Right.
everything in the military is about order and discipline. And it really, having being able to look back, it really kind of has to be that way. You really can't have an effective force where you say, hey, if you want to go, go. If you don't. If you want to, if you want to go into this combat scenario, do it. If you don't, do your
Right.
thing.
Well,
So
it's
it's
about saving lives, right? It's
yeah, yeah, 100%. So and that's not to say that every conflict we should have been in. That is not, I'm not saying that at all.
right.
I'm just saying if you're going to do it, really has to be a system of order and
Of
discipline.
order. Yeah. And that makes sense. I do think that um I know I can't live by that many rules. I wouldn't fit. I
Yeah,
wish I had it after high school. I think everybody should go spend a year in the military, live somewhere else in the world. I don't care what it is, but people need to grow up faster. And I think that's one way to
Yeah.
do it. I was not emotionally ready for all this college crap and all this other stuff. And I feel like it was a wasted year that I could have actually learned. Like it'd be great if they would teach us finances and teach us like real things that mean something, not how to write a sentence. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it'd be
Yeah.
so great, I think. We'd be a different country, and I think we'd have different points of views. Because if you think about the rural counties, like I'm from a small town of 1,000 people, maybe
Oh,
on
wow.
a good year, and,
Wow.
and you know what, a lot of people don't have the opportunity to travel or get out or go to another country. I mean, I lived in France for a year. I lived in New York. I lived in Atlanta. I've lived in Fort Lauderdale. I've been in Dallas. So you know, I've been able to experience a lot of different perspectives of people from all over the world. And I think that shapes you, certainly, and your
Yeah.
perspective, because you're not in this just one place, wherever that is, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's certainly, you lived in France for a year. I think just living overseas, regardless, military, business school, whatever it is a really formative experience. I think everybody should do that, or at least travel as much as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I got to experience some really eye opening things, like being with, like, my friends were from Sweden, Norway, England, and obviously France. I lived with French roommates and whatnot, but like,
Yeah.
they're like, "Hey, Jess, get your country back in gear because your economy's, you know, hurting us." You know,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Okay,
That's
I'll get
funny.
right on that."
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and just that whole thought process of how people are educated in Europe versus the United States. It's it's we're viewed as, you know, what we are, but like it's just different. It's different living in it and learning in it than being outside and seeing it as what it is, you know?
Yeah. Yep. I agree with you 100%.
And my German friends, it was the 10-year reunification party. And so we had a party, and like it was just so surreal to think about what they're feeling at this moment, you know? And that
Yeah.
was just like you can't that's just amazing life experiences.
It's really interesting too. We're very in America. We're very culturally sort of siloed in a
Yep.
sense. Where yesterday during the election, I had people messaging me from New Zealand, Canada, India, who are watching our election. I've never watched any of theirs. And it's not that they're not important; they're very important. But they tend to be very globally aware, and we think we are. We're not as much as we think we are.
Mm-mm.
So
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. And you know, for me, I guess we have different experiences. You had the military, I had kind of the business or school
okay.
side of the
Okay.
experience. Um, did you live abroad in Iraq? You mentioned Iraq and or Afghanistan, and
So I did deployments there, and there. Um, so there's a yes and no answer there, but I did deployments to Iraq. I did one to Afghanistan. I did one to Macedonia. The experience is much different than living like
yeah,
you did. Um, I got a little bit of that in my deployment to Macedonia was during peacetime, so that was different. And then we actually, in the beginning in Iraq, we borrowed something from Vietnam, actually called Combined Action Platoon, which became mobile training teams. But my platoon was nested with an Iraqi battalion, and so that was not the same as living abroad the way you did. I think you learn things and people speak more freely, probably the way you live. But I think I got a little bit of a taste of that being nested with or embedded with Iraqi military for a little while, where you really you make friends with people and they start to speak more openly and they say things they wouldn't have said in other instances.
so you mentioned you started with the reserves.
I did. Yep.
is that something you did like early on? And then were you in school at the same time or going to work or?
Yeah, I actually was in the reserves while I went to while I was in college, and I did work as well. I had worked full time, so I was extremely busy.
Oh, wow. That's
Um,
amazing.
that was it was a hard 4 years. Didn't have the typical college experience, and my last semester of school, I was set to graduate in December of the year when 911 happened. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I'd already gone to officer candidate school, but I really was hesitant about signing an active duty contract. And then 911 happened, and I just said I have to. And similar, I mean, pretty much everybody who joined around that time that
Yep.
was their experience. So
Yeah, I remember reading about it. A whole lot of people signed up after that, all
yeah,
ages.
yep,
Yeah,
yep.
which is good. And I know that recruitment is down, and they're really challenged with that. And and I think about my nieces and that age, they're and then even there was pot around when we're
Mhm,
pretty much close enough to the same age.
mhm.
There was pot around, whatever, people were doing it. I feel like it's like a part of their culture now, and it's just so mainstream with the smokeless tobacco stuff and all that. And I'm wondering if that has something to do with it, because you can't have had anything to do with it, right? To actually enroll or join the military. So I'm just
You
wondering.
you can get a waiver, and I didn't. I was never a recruiter, but I did. NROTC, Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps, where I had a role where I was kind of would interact with the officer recruiters in my area, so I got to know the process pretty well. Although I don't know what's really changed over the last 8 years, but um, at the time, at least, you could get a waiver for what I can't remember what they called it, but it was very very minor use. Um,
Okay.
the word escapes me, but it was very, very minor use, like one, two, three times. And now, like you said, it's very true. Now it's in THC has made its way into beverages, which it boggles my mind. And beverages that are sold in retail stores, microdoses,
Yep.
which is that happened very quickly, I think. But that might have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, that's and when we were talking earlier about rules and they own you and all the things, like kids don't want that. They
No.
don't want that discipline, and and it'll be interesting to see how the recruitment goes. I hope it goes well, but I think it's certainly not a lifestyle for everyone. But
Mm.
I think it's good. Like I said, I wish I had served at least a year and just to understand it and have a different perspective. I was talking to another gentleman at the Food Institute, and he was saying something similar, but they should go work with a farmer
Oh, that'd be
and
great.
live on the land and learn what it's
Yeah.
like to have crops and animals and
Yeah.
the whole bit. Like that's your food source.
Yeah.
That's important.
It, it's interesting. That's a really good point. But I think, and you brought up, THC use has become extremely mainstream. Some just culture has changed so much, and if you think about it, we're extremely um, affluent and comfortable culture. We don't think of ourselves that way, but like a kid that's brought up now, most kids don't have most kids, at least in my world, in my sphere, really don't have, they don't work, or they do a little bit and maybe, just they feel like it, then they don't, and they quit. Um, but I remember as a kid, like everybody had a job, everybody worked their summers.
Yep.
Um,
Pick rock,
you got,
detasseled,
do,
everybody did.
what's
Factories.
interesting? There, I don't know if you remember this. I'm not going to remember what it was called, but there was a sitcom based off of a guy who didn't get, this was in the 90s, early 90s, maybe late 80s. There's a sitcom based off of a guy who didn't get a job out of high school, and he basically lived off of his parents. And it was such a mockery. But now that's just very
It's
normal. Like, I
normal.
haven't figured out what I want to do yet. It's very normal. At the time, it was like, oh my gosh, what a crazy idea. This guy graduated from high school and didn't get a job. But we're in a very different world than we were back then.
That's
Very
true.
different world.
I'm gonna have to Google that and figure that out because I don't remember.
I'll email it to you.
Okay.
I'll email it to you. It was
Interesting.
you'll recognize at least the actor in it, but
So
yeah.
you joined after 9/11, and then did you join a specific area of interest for you, like engineering or computers, or what was your specialty?
Just like engineering. I was a combat engineer. So an engineer in the reserves, and then I when I went active duty, I stayed with the same MOS or job. Now it's a combat engineer, so I always say it's not a real engineer. I don't have an engineering background. Um, we had there's a couple of different things you can do with that in the Marine Corps. There is a construction side, which I didn't do, and then there's a mobility and counter mobility side, which you can look at that in terms of mine, counter mine, explosives. We had early on in the conflict, we had a big part of the IED or roadside bomb fight that kind of changed as we went through, but that's what I did, both in the reserves and on active duty.
So what does that entail? Like what would you can you describe like a day?
Yeah, well, my first deployment, I was a platoon commander. I was a lieutenant, and what we did the entire deployment was we went out. I would take the platoon out, and we would search for buried weapons caches. Believe it or not, we did a lot of sweeps for IEDs as well.
Okay.
But the number one thing we did was we went and we looked for buried weapons caches, because when when the Iraqi military withdrew early on in the conflict, they buried everything. They took great big, dozers and equipment, and they would dig holes, and they would bury missiles and rockets and mortars and mines, or they would put it in a pile, stack it, and then make a big mountain over it. It was kind of crazy, but the country was just loaded with weapons and explosives, and they were being used to make those IEDs or roadside bombs or improvised mines, landmines. And so our job was to find them and get rid of them, destroy them, and then sometimes again we would take mine detectors, which look like metal detectors, and we'd sweep the sides of the roads and things like that for improvised explosive devices.
Wow, that's really cool. I know there's a movie about that, and it involves, I think, some dogs. They had trained some dogs to do the same thing. Did you guys have animals or dogs with you?
Yeah, dogs. We definitely had dogs. Early in the conflict, they weren't very good. As we went on, they got better and better. Yeah,
Yeah,
mine detection or bomb detection dogs. Yeah.
that's pretty incredible. Yeah. So, and you kind of did that then for the term that or contract you called it, that you served with the Marine Corps.
Yeah, I did that in my first deployment. Then I deployed again, kind of worked my way up. I was a company executive officer on my second deployment. So that was I was a little bit less out there in the field. Um, I did operate, but it was a little less. And then I went back to Afghanistan as a company commander, and we were out all the time again.
Okay. Interesting.
But
Yeah, that's a tough job. It's a very important job.
it's rewarding, for sure.
Yeah.
But
And so when did you know that you were kind of at the end of your service? Was there a moment in time, or was it a family decision? Like what kind of, how does that, what's that process like?
It was, I think, all of those things that you mentioned. I got a very rare assignment at the University of Pennsylvania and Villanova at the very end. It was very competitive. I never thought I was going to get it, and that's kind of home for me. I was born in Philly, and then just kind of, slowly the family moved a little bit north, away from the city, but that was home for me, and very difficult to get that job at all, let alone for at an Ivy League school, let alone at the exact place I wanted, and it was just the stars aligned. I almost like, this can't be real. There's no way I got this job. And then when I got there, I really thought about getting out, but I went through a divorce there, and my next, I have kids, and my next assignment was going to be a hardship tour. I owed, that's not a hardship tour, which means the next one needed to be, which means I was either going in the Marine Corps, that means Japan, or 29 Palms, California, the desert. And I wasn't going to be able to take my kids with me. So I ended up starting a business while I was at UPenn and Villanova, and then just transitioned from there.
So, what were you teaching?
Military science, which, um, that was where I mentioned earlier, running the Marine Option and ROTC, or Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps program at those schools. There's a broader program run by a Marine colonel, and then he's over the Navy and the Marine Corps, and then the Marine Corps was mine for him. So there are a lot of things. There's a training element. You're assisting with recruiting and entry into the school, and then you teach military science, which is a actual college course. So depending on what school you went to, there may have been one, but there are a number of schools that have an ROTC agreement with the government. It's a literal contract, and part of that is there's a military science course that's taught. So I taught that course.
That is really cool. And so you transitioned, you said you started a business. So is that, you started the business that you're doing now? Or
Yeah,
has it
it
evolved?
didn't look like this. Yeah, oh yeah, it evolved. I started. I, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, but I'd done a lot of travel. We spoke about traveling, and I had opportunities to bring things back, like, rugs from the Middle East, and carvings and statues, and all kinds of stuff. And I was always very, very attracted to that. And so I thought, I'm going to import and export, and I did. I started doing that. I got myself into, various agreements. I got myself into one where I had an agreement to move a certain amount of product for a company out of Australia, and I got myself into a bind, and I turned to Amazon. This was the, kind of the early days of Amazon, and just, I mean, it clicked with me right away, and I knew right away, like, this is what I want to do.
That's awesome. So do you want to kind of talk a bit about what your company does and
Sure.
how you work with brands and sell?
Yeah, we're by our DNA. That was me back then. Now
Right.
now it's an agency, and by our DNA, we're an Amazon management agency. We focus on food and beverage, CPG. We do have other accounts now. We have a lot more than I would have said about 2 years ago. But our core is CPG, and grocery adjacent. We do skincare and hair care as well, but we've really leaned into retail media over the last about 3 years. Retail media would be your Instacarts and your WholeFoods.com. Basically, what we're doing with retail media is we're using digital platforms to drive retail sales. So if you look at Amazon like a channel, it's a very important channel, but that it's very straightforward. This is what we're doing. We're building a channel out of Amazon. Retail media is very strategic because we're not really building Instacart for the sake of building Instacart. We're building out Instacart so that we can reach in and influence actual brick and mortar retail accounts. And there are a lot of platforms to do that. I think we're on like 27 now, 27 different
Wow.
platforms, retail media platforms.
So let's walk through an example because I'm not clear on I'm not clear on how this works. I have a beverage. Let's say I have, a beverage in a can, 4-pack, whatever it is. It doesn't need to
Yep.
be alcohol. It doesn't matter. So do I come to you and say, hey, Eric, can your company help me get this merged in all these different channels?
We're a little bit later in this stage than that. And I'll give you two examples if I can.
Sure.
Food and beverage brands, velocity is really what
Right.
I'm focused on. It's not getting into the store, it's keeping the store or growing, getting
Gotcha.
more SKUs in there, or and I'm not working with a buyer or category manager. I'm driving sales, driving shelf turn. So in a couple of scenarios would be, let's say you have that 4-pack of beverage and you're in Whole Foods and your buyer says, I need 4 turns per SKU, per door, per week, per store per week. And you're at 2 and your buyer says, you really need to increase these turns. There's over 500 Whole Foods locations, so you can't really effectively demo. You probably can't afford, most smaller brands can't afford to hire a team to demo at all of those locations, but they can come to me and say, Eric, what can we do digitally? And we can increase those turns through Whole Foods media. So we can keep that account alive. Or the second scenario would be, okay, I'm in an innovation set. I don't know if have you heard much about those different
No,
retailers will have it's a
I'm very
temporary set.
interested in it though.
Yeah,
Love it.
it's really thrilling. It's a new thing that's spreading very quickly, but retailers are saying, all right, we want to have new inventory, we want to have the fresh, hot new things, but we don't know what's going to work. And that shelf real estate
Yep.
it's really valuable.
It's
So they
what I've been
can't
wanting to
just
do for just
yeah,
this is your innovation space. Come here and look and see what's new. Cause I remember being in the Navy stores in Virginia Beach and these they'll come in and go, well, we're just checking out the shelf to see what's new. Cause the buyer
yeah.
at the time would always try new things. And
Yep.
so that is just so exciting. I'm
So
glad
now
that it's happening.
and yeah, exactly. And you know, retailers are getting very kind of scientific with it, where they'll take a certain amount of shelf space and say, all right, we're going to bring new brands into this shelf space. They're going to get 90 days. And if they sell well enough, we'll keep them. We'll move them into the center of the store. So for that 90 days, the brand Sprouts is a big one. Sprouts has an innovation set. Fresh Time has one. There's so many. Wakefern is starting one. But let's say you get that 4-pack of drinks at Sprouts, and you have 90 days. Now there's 410, I think, Sprouts locations. So how do you make it sell well enough in 90 days to get that permanent spot over in the beverage set? And that's where, I can come in and say, all right, I can hit this with the Sprouts RTD account. I can target it with Instacart. And now, yeah, I'm only Instacart might be 10% of your Sprouts shoppers, and Sprouts RTD might, which advertise on sprouts.com, that might be another 10%, but we can really, really drive hard in that 20% to kind of manipulate sales data. And then the buyer doesn't know, the Sprouts buyer doesn't know or care. They just know stuff is coming off of the shelf fast enough for it to make sense at Sprouts, and then they give them that full-time placement.
Okay, so when you say Whole Foods Media, can you explain what that means?
Yeah. If you, for Whole Foods, you're actually shop, if you want to shop for delivery, and I'll probably, if I could take a step back and just say, in retail media, we're generally targeting shoppers who shop online
Okay.
for retail fulfillment. So if on Instacart, I'm pulling up my, my Instacart screen on the browser, typing in what I want and submitting the order digitally, but then somebody's actually pulling that product off of a retail shelf. So I'm influencing the retail, that retail account. So Whole Foods Media, if you look at Whole Foods, how does that happen? How does that digital shopping and retail, brick and mortar retail fulfillment work? It's on Amazon.com, and Whole Foods has an ad platform where I can advertise on Amazon.com for that Whole Foods delivery, if that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to learn about a new part of the business, it's important. It's how brands are gonna, ride or die, right? I
Right.
mean, especially it's such an exciting time, I think, in not just the beverage industry, which I'm in. There's innovation everywhere.
Oh man, it's moving fast, isn't it?
It's moving
It's just
fast,
moving
and
fast.
it's such a fun. I mean, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I love it, and I love food and I love beverage, but beverage is my primary, industry that I know. Um, and you want everybody to win somehow, because
Right.
they don't need to be one to many. They just need a few.
Right.
No, not everybody wants to be a Diageo or a Beam. You don't need to, right? So
Right.
how do
Don't
you
you?
how do you help those brands that, to navigate that? And I think that's what you guys are doing, and it's really interesting. And it's
Yeah.
20%, that's a lot.
What was that?
20% of the whole picture is a lot.
It is, and let's say in theory, if you kind of think of how the math plays out, maybe you could, in theory, on that Sprout set, we've had brands do this where we're getting 2/3 of their total sales in that innovation set through those 20% of shoppers. So it's 20% of shoppers, but it's not like we're just influencing 20% of their sales. We've carried those innovation sets through these retail media platforms. We In fact, that specific scenario I gave you, the Sprouts innovation set, it's it's like fish in a barrel. I mean, if a brand will listen and they can commit a little bit of budget for advertising budget, we can almost certainly get them full-time placement. So it's pretty
Wow,
powerful.
that is
It does
really
not
powerful.
replace those demos. I don't want to come across like I'm saying, oh, demos are terrible. Especially for beverage and food products. Demos are super powerful and they're really good. It's just they're very effective. It's just that they can do what they can do. They can get your customer to taste the product for the first time. What they can't do is give you a sustainable ROI over time.
Not like you can.
I
Food,
can't reach into the store and make that connection with a customer. So
right.
I think there's a really good marriage of the two of those, and then trade promotion in the store. There's a really good combination of those, but it should be a combination, I think, and not a I know what I know, and that's what I'm going to do.
Are you finding that this is common knowledge, or brands aren't aware of it,
No, it's
or owners of brands?
it's I would say fewer brands. I think a lot of brands know what Instacart is now, and what they'll do is they'll go in and they'll turn on an auto campaign, um, and let it run, which is really just barely scratching the surface of what retail media can do. Um, but there are an awful lot that don't, and there's a lot of for whatever reason, I don't know where it comes from, but there's a lot of lack of trust in reporting. Like, you have a company like Instacart or Whole Foods, and they're telling you that you're getting this many sales, this many clicks and this many sales. They don't get away with just lying about data, but there's so much, mistrust out there for these platforms, and it's always around reporting. I can't trust the reporting. I can't trust the reporting. I think companies of that size, they don't make their money um, by defrauding companies. They're, in fact, every single one of them, when I've gone to the, gone to the hose, so to speak, and said, "Hey, can you break down how your reporting works?" They always are able to tell me. They're maybe not an account manager at the bottom, but if you press it, they will unpack for you exactly how the reporting works. So I don't know why there's so much mistrust out there.
Hmm.
If
Interesting.
they do understand what retail media is, and there
Yeah.
still are a lot that don't.
Now,
So,
can you do retail media with alcohol, given the laws and the challenges and that
you certainly
by
can.
state to state? I mean, it's different.
You certainly can. You can do it through Instacart. Instacart will, they have, I would say it's, as a rule of thumb, these delivery platforms can deliver alcohol. They just have to check ID. So the person that drops, delivery person has to check an ID. But yes, you can absolutely work with alcohol.
Interesting. Well, hopefully my listeners will contact
Yeah.
you or to reach out and learn more about this channel, because I think it's really cool. And
Yeah.
I never thought about it because I don't think, I mean, I'm kind of old school brick and mortar, uh, thinking, and I'm not as savvy, online, in that regard. So, I know that, as close as I could get to what you're doing is being an Amazon affiliate.
Yeah.
And I'm not even a good one of those. Not yet, anyway.
It, I mean, you know what though? You look at some of the what I would call maybe analog programs, like trade promotion, in-store trade promotion. Uh, that makes my head hurt. I have a friend who does that. That's what he does for brands. His name's Fred Schrader, which could be an interesting person for you to have here. But that's all he
Yeah,
does is trade promotion. He
I'd
makes
love
it
it.
he makes it a science. And as much as he tries to explain to me what he does, I get it. It's just we can't all be an expert in 50 different things. So we all
100%.
have our lane, and we all have lots of things we can't do. That's for sure.
Well, and you don't have time, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And when you look at the most successful people, I mean, just think about a musician, for example. I mean, like the Eagles. You know how many times they've played the same songs over and over and
Yeah.
over and over and over, you know? Um, but that's what works. You got to be really, really, really skilled at something to really make it
Yeah.
work.
Yep. That's so funny you said that. I listened to a podcast yesterday, and it was two actors, and they were talking. They're pretty well known. I won't say who they were, but they were talking about how bad um, celebrities are at sports, and they were saying that's this is they throw their whole life into acting, and they go to acting school, and they don't play. Most of them don't play sports in college or high school or whatever. They're acting. That's what they do. That's
Yep.
what they're good at. They're very good at it. But I think to your point, that's just the less you do of everything else, the better you could potentially be in your lane,
Yeah.
for sure.
And I'm not very good at that. There's this word my wife likes to use. It's called focus. And it's really hard for me. I'm a high visionary, so I'm always, and visionaries and analytics people, we're problem solvers, right?
Yeah.
So we're always trying to find a solution or figure things out, or for me, I'm always thinking about the next thing. I can't tell you how many businesses I've thought of, and then they happen and I don't do anything about it. So I'm not doing that anymore. I'm doing
Yeah.
something about it.
There's a phrase I heard, and I've been is just as guilty of that. I think any entrepreneur is, right.
Yeah.
You have ideas, or that shiny object. But something I heard said a while ago that stuck with me is entrepreneurs are the only bridge builders that change the direction of their bridge multiple times before they get to the other side. And I've definitely done that in business where this thing is, this is going to be so hot. And then you start driving into that thing and then something else. And I'm really learning now to be like, all right, this is what I do. I need to get this bridge to the other side. But
Yeah, that's interesting because when you start a business, what ends up happening isn't necessarily what you started with, right?
yeah,
Because you have to ebb and flow through the market demand. Like I
yeah,
had the guys from Speakeasy on. They've been bought out by Flaviar now, but they had a whole different vision of what they wanted to do, and by talking to people and learning,
mm-hmm.
they've kind of ebbed and flowed throughout, and did a great job. Obviously, they got bought out, so you just never know, like if when you start, what's going to happen. And I think that's the scary part, but it's also the exciting part, right? Because
Yeah,
you have an
yeah.
idea, let's see where it goes.
There's definitely a balance, right? I mean, Amazon is a classic example of they have a culture of R&D, and they always Jeff Bezos used to always say test and learn, test and learn, test and learn. So like he has this bridge going to the other side, but then there's also these little tests, along the way. He's constantly doing these little tests. So it's a balance, I guess, right? Where you have to double down on what's working for sure,
Yeah.
but you also have to be testing the other opportunities out there.
Yeah, because the last thing you want is to age out of whatever the product cycle is and not have another plant, right? I mean,
Yep.
when you think of companies, I mean, Sears, for example, who would have thought when we were kids, Sears
Yeah.
would not be?
Yep. But they
I mean,
didn't, they didn't exactly like you said. There was no adjustment. Sears to the last store, and J.C. Penney's and Clover. Do you remember them?
mm,
They were all, just this. J.C. Penney's still around, but they haven't. There's been no innovation,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. And when it happened, it was a little late to the game. I know,
Yeah.
J.C. Penney's is based here in Dallas, and they've tried.
Good.
They hired a guy from Apple to reinvent the stores, and it's just even I think Macy's, because everything's online, it's a
Yep.
struggle. It's just a different, way of
And they were late. A lot
tourism.
of those retailers were late to the even online. You mentioned a good point. You're either going to be digital, you're going to lean hard into digital, or you're going to create an experience where people want to be in that store. And you have a lot of those department stores that did neither. They were, or they kind of really half-heartedly did digital, or they were really late to the game, like Sears. Sears has a marketplace, Macy's has a marketplace, but they were just so late to the game. They didn't want to do that, and then they didn't innovate hard enough for that in-store experience. So
Yeah,
I don't know. Hopefully, I'm pulling for Macy's, but we'll see.
yeah, yeah. You don't
And
want,
J.C. Penney,
yeah, both.
they're still
Yeah, they're big here, and you feel good when you walk in the stores. I worked at the Macy's in New York City when I moved out there.
really
Yeah,
flagship.
yeah, it was interesting. I worked in men's clothing, like not the suit and tie kind of stuff, but like the casual wear and jeans and whatnot. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting experience, and it's part of our culture too, I think.
Yeah, especially that one, right? I was in there a couple months ago. That is just an interesting store. Um,
Yeah, I would have customers that would fly in for the weekend from England just to go
wow,
shopping in the United States because it's cheaper to fly to US, will stay in New York, buy a bunch of clothes, and fly back.
really?
I don't know if
Yeah.
that's the way it is now, but yeah.
Well, I know there was a time where, like Levi's, which is not a particularly expensive brand in the U.S. by any stretch, where it was extremely expensive in India. So I guess the same principle.
Yeah.
It might have come down a little bit at this point, but I don't know, but it's interesting.
So I want to shift the conversation slightly here. As you're a veteran of the Marine Corps, what I've talked to other veterans that I've been going to have on the podcast and whatnot, and I know there's other veterans that have podcasts that talk about this. So I just want to touch a little bit on it and the importance of how you get from military life to civilian life and how the government is doing it. Are they doing enough? Is there things that can be done to further help that transition? Like, what is your kind of thought process on it?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I don't, when I was in the Marine Corps, you'd hear things like, our troops should be paid more, or we should be doing this, we should get, health care for life. And I never subscribed to that. And I still don't, honestly. I think when you do, I'm not saying that there aren't things missing, for sure. I think there are some very good VA hospitals and some that are not very good, but I don't think it's necessarily a problem with the VA. I think it's more localized. That's just my opinion. But when you join the military, it's there's a lot in it for you that's not pay. There's a lot. There's some. I got a lot out of that besides pay, and I'm very grateful for that experience. So I don't feel like troops are out there being mistreated or not taken care of enough. It is hard when if you're 19 and you join the military and you decide to have kids or whatever. It's very hard, but it's also hard in the civilian world to be 19 and
Right.
Get it's just hard. It's just hard in life, and it's
It's
okay.
hard.
Yeah,
It's a
it
hard
just
balance. It is. It's a lot.
100%. But in terms of transition, I just had this conversation yesterday. But when you go into the military, there's so much of your identity that they hand you. You wear a uniform, you wear a rank. Like, your rank is part of your identity. There are people who know, you're, hey, this guy, girl is in charge by their rank. The way you speak, the things you can say, the things that you do when you walk past somebody, what you have to say when you walk past an officer or senior enlisted person. Your job title. You asked me right away, what did you do? There's so much identity that you draw automatically, and then when you get out, you lose all of that. And that's why you have some people in the military that's all they just keep bringing it back to the military. And I think it's because there's so much identity there. And that, my point is that creating that new identity has to be very, very active, and it's on us. We don't like to say that. We want to put it on other people, but we have to figure out who we want to be. And now, if you look at business, this is where I would say, if somebody out there is in hiring, I would be really careful about saying, well, we support our veterans. But in the hiring process, in reality, a lot of times what that looks like is we hire veterans. Well, if you hire a veteran, that's great. But most organizations do that because they get somebody who's vetted and they've been not committing crimes for the last 10, 20 years, and because you can't, and so it's not like a gift. And so when you're in active duty, when you're in the military and you're getting out, you're like, oh, all these organizations, they support veterans. Well, they hire veterans because there's a vetting process in the military, but it doesn't mean you're not going to be gifted with your new life. Like, you are going to have to work. You're going to have to start out like anybody else. You're going to have, there's a transition. You might take a pay cut. That is not uncommon. So who does that fall on? I'm not sure exactly, but I think we have to be realistic when we make that transition, that you're not just going to get out and your life is just going to level up and things are going to get easy, because well, I'm bringing this military experience and I've had leadership and now I'm going to get paid a whole bunch of money. That is not always the case. I think it's probably, if anybody has a burden of doing a better job, it's probably the military itself in just preparing, people for what is it really going to be like when you get out.
Yeah, especially if you get in at 19, you're just a kid, and now you're 45, and you're like, it's a big transition.
Yep. You're 100% right. You don't know anything else. You
Yeah.
walked in and you were told what to say, what to wear, what to do, what your job is going to be, and then you're first. That a lot of the learning that you had to do if you weren't in at a much younger age, you're doing it as that 45-year-old.
So, has your military experience and background influenced the way you manage and the way you run your business?
Definitely. You know, I think I've had so many people say, well, business must be so much easier. I got out as a major, led um, units of hundreds of people. And I've had people say, well, business must be so much easier for you. Well, some things have been easier and some things have been harder because I did not have those experiences in business. I I was that not I wasn't 45 when I got I was 39, but um or 38, but I had those um I didn't come up in corporate America. I still never have. I've never worked in corporate America, so some of the systems that are out there I didn't learn. I still don't know what to do when I still have to ask people, like when somebody, like an employee does something, like what can I do? I don't want to fire this person, but this was unacceptable. I don't know what I can do. I know what I could do in the Marine Corps as a captain, but I can't rely on that here. So there are just things I've had to learn and ask for help with. And then other things like leadership and making sure that motivating the team, and there are systems I've of course brought with me, that I think are unique to the military. So it's been a mix, I think, to answer your question.
Yeah, that's really
Been a
interesting.
mix.
I'm thinking, thank God you didn't have corporate experience, because it's not. th- there's no there's no hard and fast rules. There's not a lot of employee support in a lot of cases. So,
Interesting.
I don't think you missed out on anything. I think if you can
Right.
surround yourself by the people that can answer those questions, then that's what you do, right? Um,
Interesting.
my biggest takeaway from all of this, my background experience is like what kind of CEO or what kind of leader I'm going to be, and how I'm going to treat employees, and how I want to invest in them, and make them
Dude.
be their best selves, not just for work, but for them. And nobody really does that. And so that's kind of, to me, what's important based on my experience that I've had, you know.
Boy, that's super interesting. Well, I think that's a hallmark of a good leader, though, is to be able to go back into your path and say, that person, I want those traits, and this other person, I want those. Whereas we hear an awful lot about, like, don't be a toxic leader, or don't be. Well, yeah, of course not. But who do we want to be? Like,
Right.
we have all the things that we shouldn't do, but what are the things we should do to be that net positive leader? That's an
Yeah.
interesting perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think that's just super important, because as an employee, you want your employer to believe in you, and you put everything into it, right? And it's just that
Yeah,
that give and take is just so important. And I think that companies aren't prepared, and they don't understand like how that works. And certainly there are some, and I'm sure there's a lot of great innovative companies that do
Mhm.
that. But for me,
Yeah,
in my experience, and I'm not saying I had a bad experience everywhere I went or anything like that. I'm just saying I'm gonna, like you said, take that experience and um, be somebody different, or
yeah,
evolve into something different.
yeah, yeah. Create your own identity, right?
Yep.
Leadership identity.
So this has been awesome. I thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I'm so thankful you had time to sit down with me today and talk through your experience in life and your service at the Marine Corps. And, I'm really excited about this segment, and I'm super pumped that you were able
Cool.
to kind of lead off, and we were able to pull it off before Veterans Day so I can get it ready. And with that, I guess we'll say Happy Veterans Day
Yeah,
to all
happy
the
Veterans
troops.
Day.
God bless our
Thank-
troops, right?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for having me, Jesse. I very much appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Produced by Fedora J Productions.